Welcome to the Do-Right podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of CBAM. Join us as we dive into the latest strategies and insights to help your business stay ahead. Let's get started. Let's get started. Carbon border, let's adjust. Finding solutions is a must.
My name is Marcel Duits. I'm the Managing Director of Dubrink, and I'm here with the CTO of Dubrink, Jan-Joos den Brinker. Dubrink is actually a company which offers a CBAM calculation platform. You might wonder, what is CBAM? CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And in this podcast, you will find out exactly what it is. But it's not about Dubrink. It's not about us. It's because we have here a very special guest. All the way from Italy. And I have to say, Luigi, that from the moment that I met you, I was impressed by your knowledge. Not just how much you know about CBAM, but especially how much you know about steel, and especially the combination of these two. I don't need to introduce you, but I'm sure you can do it much better. So here we go.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much for inviting me here and inviting me to this podcast. What about me? I started my career in the steel more than 20 years ago, and now I'm still involved in the steel as a consultant. I've been working in production. I've been working as a quality manager, quality director. I've been involved in naval inspection. So from the beginning, after the end of the university, before indeed the end of the university, I was in steel. 2 or 3 years ago, I started this adventure, my own company as a consultant, and of course it was a lucky coincidence that at that time CBAM was becoming a reality and starting to be introduced in a real practical way in the companies. And so most of my customers were asking about assistance for CBAM and everything. I started as anyone digging into it, and now I will say that it's a relevant part of my activity and my business.
So with CBAM these days, what are you doing? What are you contributing to the clients you currently have? And what is the current status, especially in Italy?
Yes, so about CBAM, the location is not that relevant. But basically what I'm doing is to try to solve a little bit the complication of the CBAM. Because first of all, CBAM is designed and was thinked in a way that just with two actors, producer and importer. Mm-hmm. This is never working in the real life. Normally you have something in between, a trading company, a financing company, maybe an external importer because the material is imported in Europe but by a foreign company. That's an example in Switzerland. A Switzerland company cannot import into Europe, so they have to appoint someone doing that. And this is making the flow of information really complicated. So first of all, the part of the calculation. So on the side of the installation, I'm supporting the installations and the producers in making proper calculation and designing the process in a good way according to the requirement of the norm. But apart of that, it's really important to have a consistent and reliable flow of information between all the actors, because especially with this Excel file, I don't want to say if it's famous or notorious, but with this Excel file, it's really complicated to transfer the information, because we all know that just opening and closing an Excel file, maybe not refreshing the links or something like that, can complicate the data, can modify the data, and can transform the file in something not usable.
And over, just to make that clear, right? Like over the last 5-6 months, I've seen a lot of communication templates, but I hadn't seen a communication template as complex as the one that you sent me a sample of back when we first started working together. And that also highlights a real problem, like the complexity of the processes that some steel factories, steel mills produce. That's big.
It's Listen, I have really a conflict about this Excel file, because if you do the calculation, if I use it to make the calculation, it's really useful to understand how the calculation must be done. Okay, so at the beginning, and the moment when CBAM appeared, more than studying the norm, I was studying the Excel file, understanding the connection here and there, how the calculations were made, making a kind of reverse engineering. And honestly speaking, the first version was even not working properly, so we had to make reverse engineering to fix the problem. But that's another thing. But to use the Excel file also for the communication, it cannot work, because if it's something that must be studied and understood by a technician in the installation, it cannot be used by the importer, because the importer cannot be skilled in steel. Maybe it's a company importing every good for third parties, and they don't understand what's going on. So I see my work is to try to make these things simple, because the communication and the trust between the sender and the receiver of the information, I think it's mandatory. Because, here we are talking about control of the emissions of something produced maybe 10,000 kilometers far away from the place where it's imported, with different cultural approach, different way of calculation, different even units to measure the gas flow or the combustion or everything. And it's really, really complicated. So,
and what I've seen is, look, we see in Dubrink, we see custom experts, we see lawyers. But what I found interesting with you is that you mentioned just that you're trying to make things simple. But the reason why you're so good at it is because you literally have been galvanizing steel yourself, right?
You were just telling us about that.
Because that shows why you are such an expert in this field.
It's because when I started working, I was straight from the university, and I was appointed as a production manager of a facility with a lot of people below me doing the job. I was in charge for a lot of people. They were doing effectively the work. I was just a miserable former student since few hours, and I was feeling not comfortable, not understanding completely what they were doing. So basically, I was spending the day doing the office work and everything, and the night learning how to roll the material, how to process the material, because, in my opinion, if you don't do it, maybe you don't have to be the best roller or the best processor in the world, but you have at least to know what you are doing. But it's the same for a sales guy. A sales guy has to know what he's selling, otherwise it cannot be effective. And so that's the way I started, and it was a kind of imprinting. Of course, now if I have to manage a facility, I will not spend hours in understanding how it works, because I have all the experience. But I did it for so long time, and so in a deep practical way, that now I can tell you, I can draw here a galvanizing line and show you where are the points of emissions, or where you can improve something or anything.
And related to CBAM, what does that bring you, that you can provide actually a better service than many others? Because I also see CBAM files being filed by people who have actually no clue about how the steel factories work.
As we told, the CBAM, the way it's designed, the way it was designed, it was really simple, but the reality is different.
Complex, yeah.
It's really complex. Yeah. And the idea of the guy that wrote the regulation, you have raw material, producer, and importer. Normally, you have 25 sources of million of different raw materials that are combined in different production processes, and after that, this material is sprayed all around the world. That's normally the world of the steel. and the facility can be located, or a part of the process can be located in one city. After that, the material is moved in another location to be transformed, to be slit, to be cut into sheets or whatever. Where I can make the difference is in the design of the flow, because the CBAM is based on the process. So every product, for each product, you have to design and think a process, and from that process you have to calculate the emissions on the material that you produce. Basically, that's something that I can do with a sketch. I know it. Knowing just the CN code or the type of product, I can tell you what's the production flow and what's the process. This is really helping, because after that is just simple math. So that's where I think I make the difference.
And then we're not going to talk too much about our platform, but how does a platform like DoBrink, which calculates, automates it for you, helps you in that compared to the
it helped me a lot.
Yeah?
It helps me a lot, because first of all,
we're
the
happy to
Excel
hear.
file. No. But guys, that was really changing things. It's not just a problem of making the calculation. Indeed, it's really faster to do the calculation with your platform rather than using the Excel file. First of all, you remove almost 100% of the typo error, because you cannot make typo errors. Second of all, you are just collecting the essential information.
Yeah.
Now here we are talking about CBAM for steel. But CBAM is for steel, aluminum, cement, blah, 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 blah. So the Excel file has been designed, they had to design it to cover everything, all the products, and maybe it's designed even to cover products that will be added in the future. With your system, and the moment you understand what is the product, you are just pre-filtering, let's say, the data that are needed. So you cannot put as a raw material for steel production water or
Cement.
ammonia or clinker. That's really an advantage. The second thing is that the design of the process, and the moment you understand and you have in your mind what is the process, it's really easy.
Yeah,
It's really easy.
that's why even a lot of beginners work with our software, because it's kind of simple.
Yes, it's simple. Obviously, the software is on average smarter than the people that is sitting in front of him, but you have to know what you are doing, and that's the reason, because we spent a lot of hours checking the calculation, because the software was designed by you guys that are not steel experts. So we had this long time of kind of debugging, that it was not a debugging, but it was a kind of fine-tuning, exactly to match what was the platform for the calculation with the logic of the steel production.
Yeah. Because I still remember the first time we met. I think it was a demonstration of the software.
Yeah.
You were pretty happy to see. I have to say, like 99.5% of all the demos, I see people like, this is actually what I need. And from there on, we've actually moved forward. You actually checked our software, right? You did all the calculations together.
I think it's really important as well that we as a platform have kind of, as a company as well, like have the humility to go and take a step back and be like, well, we are very good at software. We're very good at understanding the overlapping areas of, okay, sure, there's carbon accounting there perhaps, there's logistics, there's all these different parts that make CBAM so complicated. There's tax, there's finance, there's this overlap. But then at the same time, take this step back and be like, well, you are a true expert in this particular area. Weigh in and, okay, you use a bubble approach, you use this methodology, you are much more common to work with multiple factories, multiple precursors, and just being able to then take that feedback rather as a constructive criticism, I guess, to truly integrate it into what is now, I would definitely say a better version simply because of that feedback. And that's been really cool.
From my side, of course, so when the CBAM started, first a lot of consultants, and after that it was a second wave of platforms to make the calculation. So I made a demonstration with you, I made a demonstration with many other platform, your competitors. And in the end, what I saw in your system, it was the possibility to develop what I was looking for, because I'm not a software guy, but I know perfectly all the limits of the Excel file because I'm a steel guy. And it was too complicated. It was too complicated even to me to explain to my customers, to the producers, why I was allocating some emission some way or some other calculation, and sometimes I was stretching the numbers just to have the good results. With you guys, I had the possibility. So first of all, I found something that it was essential. I mean, not something fancy or interesting to see on the screen.
Because it's getting essential. I hear from everybody that they say, look, it's impossible to do this manually, to do this just with the Excel sheets, to send them up and down the supply chain. It's going to be for the small ones, yes. But if you have
for the small, it's always the old story. Does it worth to use the default values or some statistical, to be polite, values and not spend money on that, or is better to put 4 persons cracking their head open on all these regulations and files and procedures and have something solid? It's up to the company. It's up to the needs. I hear companies producing millions of tons of steel saying, I don't care about the CBAM. Let's put the default values and it is what it is. And I see guys importing peanuts, tens of tons of products.
We had
exactly.
That was aluminium in this case, but we had that in there.
Desperate, saying, "Oh my God, they are not giving." Oh my God, guys, they are not giving me the right values, and I have to change supplier. But it will be, I mean, it's a historical supplier. I don't know what to do it. And we were talking about 70 tons imported per year. So there is this approach. I will say that the actors in the CBAM, at least at the beginning, now it's a little bit changing, but they were the one underestimating it, or I mean, looking for a shortcut, and the other guys looking for trying to do the things in the right way. And of course, those guys were really trying to do their best to show that they were not manipulating the data, they were doing the right calculation, they were following everything. And those are the kind of customers that I'm supporting. And with your system, it's really, really easy. And it's helping me not in the simple calculation that you can do even with a pencil and a piece of paper. But of course, in the moment you have, for example, one trading company that is having 10 importers and 20 suppliers, you cannot do manually.
No, you need seamless integration.
Exactly. You cannot do manually.
Yeah.
You have to do everything in the same on the same platform. So that's the reason, because the platform, I think it will be the future. Maybe not for the small one, but maybe not for the big one, but for that 80% of the market that it's far away from the extremes.
Yeah. Hey, gentlemen, how is the next declaration going to be different from the previous one?
Please.
Yeah, and there's actually already something that we haven't discussed. I wanted to bring it up earlier, but we didn't have the time to do that. But I'll talk to you about that in a second. But of course, first real declaration with actual values. Default values are, let's say, persona non grata or something like that.
Yeah.
Of course, we're seeing pretty good reply rates, but we still see a couple of, like you said, there are very large steel mills. They just don't care. These are the values, take it or leave it. What kind of differences do you see between, let's say, perhaps even among your clients? Like last quarter, it was like, oh, yeah, sure, we just do this by ourselves, or we do a little bit here. And how has that changed? And it was like, oh, this is going to be different.
I will say that after the declaration of the 31st of July, that it was the last allowed to be done with the default value, so basically declare just to declare, it was a really big excitement about the next one. So anyone after that, both importers and installations, they were nervous about the fact that, oh my God, we cannot use the default value anymore, so we have to take it, we have to speak with our suppliers, what can we do if we don't receive an answer? Also because the default values is a tricky definition, and we will come to that soon. Now, I am seeing that there are a bit of cold feet because some government already started saying, some local CBAM controllers started saying, okay, but you can use the CBAM, the default values if they are justified, or if you can prove that you didn't find anything better. Someone really important, that is indeed Mario Draghi, even forecasted the kind of procrastination of the temporary period. So, now it seems that even the regulator is understanding that it's too complicated. And it's too complicated because the default values at the beginning were considered like you are importing something, you don't have the emission, you use the default values. So for the importer. But it was underestimated the number of default values, the quantity of default values that can be used even for the calculation. So it's moving one step back, not from the producer, but for the producer of the raw material used for the material. Exactly.
Precursors.
The famous precursors. And I have to tell you that in the steel world, there are a lot of producers, importers, as CBAM calls them, that are simply transforming steel. So I will make it really simple. They buy coils, steel coils, they galvanize them, and they export them to Europe. Their contribution to the total emission, to the embedded emission of the galvanized steel,
close
of
to
the
zero.
process of galvanizing, it's less than 1%. It's nothing. Everything is the raw material.
And then sometimes this is only using electricity, which is indirect emissions, which then may or may not be even considered during the definitive period.
Exactly.
So that's also...
But what is tricky is that maybe the supplier of the precursor, is not interested in making the calculation for the CBAM, or in making the calculation according to the rules of CBAM. Because don't forget that CBAM is one of the 1,000 ways to calculate emission all around the world. So maybe a Taiwanese galvanizing facility installation is buying material from a Chinese source that is calculating the emission accordingly to the GHG protocol. They have different figures and they don't fit into CBAM. But that's a relevant part of the emission of the galvanized product that will be imported in Europe. So it's really complicated and it's really difficult to control it.
But you mentioned the report of Draghi. We also have seen something else in Romania happening, right?
Yeah, because that's actually the exact opposite of the behavior that you're probably highlighting, right? In Romania, the government sent out a notice. It's like, listen, we actually have to start taking CBAM very serious. And we saw massive sign-ups, just not only from the importer side, but also from consultants. Yeah. And I mean, just this week alone, I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, it doesn't matter enough. But
it's been a busy week.
Like, how much can you do? I mean, in theory, you can take the plane, you go to China, you can knock on the door of the factory and say, I really need this, and explain them why you need them, and that if they don't provide the data, that they might lose clients, right? Apart from sending a few emails and saying, can you please provide this data? And we see that now there's pressure from the government in Romania. Suddenly everybody wakes up and things start to happen. So there is something in between. I believe if we go Draghi style, let's say, it could.
I think that I'll try to sell that in a technical and not politic way. It's up to the approach of each country. I don't see Germany putting something like Romania, because they can say, listen, let's take a break here, let's go easy on that, because otherwise it will affect badly. But there are a lot of countries into Europe that they are trying to, again, I don't want to say show off, but increase their power into the European Union. And over there, it can work.
How do you see, first of all, you have EU regulation, CBAM, great, but then how do you see variations of that regulation roll out on a national level? Because that's going to get very complicated.
That's a problem, for example, of lobbying. And it's important, of pressures. Let's take Italy. I'm very familiar with the steel industry in Italy. There are players importing tenth of million of tons of steel, importing from outside Europe. Especially with the European steel situation now. I don't want to go into the markets, but the production of the steel in Europe is really weak. China is flooding the market with low price steel. So anyone is really interested in buying and in importing material from outside Europe. And companies with 35, 40, 45,000 employees that all of a sudden they'll have to start paying hundreds of millions of euros for the import of steel. I mean, they have a good leverage to have some delays or something like that. What I can say is that in the short future, we can have this misalignment between national governments or national procedures or approach toward the CBAM. But in the future, everything will be equalized. And I think that CBAM will be exactly like ETS was 15 years ago, will be something common and accepted and used on a daily basis.
We just wrote today on a LinkedIn page an article. Maybe you've read it. It's about the central bank in Europe. I think it's impossible to move back on CBAM because it's just part of a much bigger plan. And with respect to the national authority, maybe it's interesting to mention what, for example, was announced today in Czech Republic.
Yeah, that's what I
Not sure if you know. But
that's one of the one wanted to bring up with you. So the Czech authorities, they are also dealing with CBAM, of course. They decided that if you are reporting default values this declaration, just report 0 as the emissions, so that it is easier for the national authority to then differentiate between what has been actual emissions compared to... Now that for us, like we are based in Czech Republic, so for us this is also important to follow the regulation, but that was such a shocker.
It's for us easy to change it in the platform.
No.
Right?
Yeah,
but
we can do country level specific rules. It's no problem.
That's the advantage of having a platform, because you will be checking all the regulations country by country, and you can set it up locally. But coming back at this idea, it sounds crazy when you listen to that. But if you think at the purpose of the CBAM, it's to, or at least of the transitional period, that I have the feeling is, I don't want to say failing, but struggling to start up properly. It's to collect data, to create benchmarks. And if you have data, the most relevant part of the data that are not reliable, or exactly the data that European Commission gave to start to make the declaration, you understand that it's a loop and they will not collect any data.
Yeah.
So at least I think that who was designing this procedure for of putting 0 instead of the default values, it was simple to make data analysis.
Yeah.
So you remove the zeros and you make a real data analysis on the declared data.
Because on the data we get now during the transitional period, we're going to create eventually the values for the definite period, right?
Yes and no. I think that because the mechanism. So basically, the difference between the initial period and the famous totally enforced period that will be is that in the transitional period, nothing must be paid or compensated in terms of emission. At the end of the transitional period, of course, anyone will have to pay. And here we go into the trick of it's not a trick, the complicated formula to calculate the cost of the emission when are imported.
Something we've really struggled with when we were designing the forecast for the platform as well.
It's complicated because you have basically 3 factors that are contributing to the specific cost of the emissions. And those are ETS, cost of the emission.
The price of the price of the
ETS is called
per ton.
Per ton.
CO2.
Specific. Plus, one is the specific ETS price. After that, you have the allowance, and it's something that it's already defined because we know that the CBAM will fade in while ETS will fade out. So basically, we have this value of the allowance.
ETS free allowances.
Exactly.
The ETS remains, but the free allowances
will decrease.
Yeah.
And the third one is the benchmark value.
This is
because the base of the compensation is that you have to pay the emissions exceeding the benchmark. And the benchmark, it's something really scary because it's taking, as a benchmark, is taking the average of the emissions of the 10 best producers in Europe in terms of emission, best in terms of emission.
Lowest emissions.
Can you repeat it again so everybody hears? Because it's
this is big.
You take, you make a ranking of the producers of a certain CN code or a certain category of products, and the average of the best 10% in terms of emission is defined as a benchmark. Unfortunately, or fortunately, this is not related to the quantity of steel produced. So we all know that in Europe there are a lot of industrial laboratories. As a metallurgist, I can say that. Producing steel starting from hydrogen or starting from kryptonite or whatever it is, but producing with really, really low emission. And that's not, those are not industrial reality. Those are just industrial labs, experimental labs, because nobody's producing or can produce nowadays steel in a large scale starting from from hydrogen instead of the carbon. But this is tricky because those guys, they wait exactly like the biggest blast furnace in Europe. And so there is the real risk to have a very low benchmark value. And considering that, again, the emission to be compensated will be the real emission of the good minus the benchmark. So the part of emission exceeding the benchmark, as lower is the benchmark, as higher is the compensation.
So that's almost like if we want to set the bar of having the average quality of the skills of a soccer player, and as a benchmark we take the top 10 of Juventus. Right?
Exactly.
It's not good.
I'm sorry. I'm a typical Italian, so this is I don't know anything about.
This was the first thing we agreed on. We have nothing in common.
I have
with
nothing
football,
in common to that. But if we move to something that I'm more familiar with,
I mean, let's do motors, right?
Exactly.
The benchmark of the speed of a motor, but we take the 10 fastest motor of a Grand Prix.
We take the 10 fastest fighter jets.
We go for the emission of a car and we take as a benchmark a Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's going to happen, you think, when they do that?
I think that anyone will check more carefully their calculation. That will be really a kind of a cornerstone for the CBAM, because now everything is foggy, nobody has to compensate, there is just this kind of risk of a penalty or a ticket or something, and
the pressure is in a way not on, right? I mean, I see a lot of people approaching us and they love the software and they sign up, but on the other end they're also like, I don't feel it yet. I think they really start to feel it in 2025.
That's sad because keeping the pressure on, for example, now anyone is having a big risk because the penalties in case of wrong declaration started from the declaration of January of this
and
year.
if they audit in 2027 and they go 4 years back and you don't have
You got exactly the point. You got exactly the point. And European Union is even not giving feedback about the previous
Nobody knows if
Nobody
the data
knows
is correct.
if they did it good or not. You have a certain window of time to amend the data, but indeed you cannot amend the data. You can just cancel your declaration and re-upload it.
But you can amend the data, but you can re-upload it, but you have no validation about the initial data being correct. So what are you comparing it against?
There is also some fog about the third-party verification, because also here it's complicated. Conceptually, CBAM, it's an European law, let's call it. I don't want to call it tax because it's not a
regulation.
Tax. It's a European regulation. And so it's effective and it has power just on European entities. So how can an importer verify if the data shared by a producer on the other end of the world are correct or not? And here we open the Pandora box of the third-party verification. Because also there are no rules. So long story short, from each side you try to look at the CBAM, it's a good idea. It can work at least to equalize the approach to the emissions on not on the people producing in Europe, but on the people that want to be in the European Union, so in the European market. So that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's really complicated. It's too complicated, and it's not possible to control.
But to put a bit of counterweight, I always mention that CBAM is kind of like a baby. It's not a grown-up yet. It still needs several years to learn and to change. And that's what I see happening too. So, for example, with the third-party verifications, we are in contact with a lot of companies where we want to cooperate within our platform. And you see more and more companies realizing like, hey, there's business. It's where I can help. These are their factories who I can audit, I can verify, I can find out over there if the data is as they say the data is. I can even go to sub-suppliers if they want. So I think in a few years, this whole sphere of CBAM as third-party verificators will look totally different.
I always like who
the
looks
optimism.
I like who looks for the glass half full.
Yeah.
From my side, I can simply say that a baby cannot become a doctor or a lawyer expecting the university to go to him. So he has to do something. And what I'm saying is that CBAM should be tutored by European Union.
I understand what you mean. Yeah.
And with real feedback from people that sit and sit at the table, are impacted.
High
level,
I mean,
lower levels.
It's three of us. You are doing your business. I'm doing my business. Why there is not someone here? Not here, okay, it's too ambitious. But why there is not someone doing what we are doing, but from the European side, from the European Commission side?
Yeah.
It seems that CBAM, it's a bomb dropped that's somehow and sooner or later will explode. But we don't know when. We don't know if someone is taking care of that. That's something that it's making things a little bit more complicated and making the actors not feeling the right pressure on that.
Yeah. So if you're from the European Union and you would like to say something about this, join the podcast. We'd love to have you here in the studio. Continue.
I actually want to go back to the price that importers will be paying, because we got cut off a little bit or distracted. So we mentioned there's 4 components. We mentioned there's the ETS price. There is obviously the benchmark. There is the free allowance that's being cut off, but there is a 4th component as well.
I forgot to mention, but
I caught you.
Thank you very much. And it's the second time you do it, so
because it's very top of mind for me. So I'd love for you to continue with that, and please.
Yes,
tell that.
the 4th component, it's basically, let's try to make it simple, the emissions already compensated at home. Because the CBAM, to be compliant with all the WTO and all the other all the other commercial agreements all around the world, cannot impose a second payment for the emission. So basically, what you pay at home, you don't pay it when you import into Europe through CBAM. That's the reason because, for example, China is having a really strong ETS system because they saw it. For China, a really important market is United States and some states of the United States, like California, where
they
most
have their
of
own
the
ETS
exactly
as well. Yeah.
they have their own ETS. China was exporting there. One of the biggest, of the closest destination for China into the U.S. was LA, because on that side it's easier. So they started moving really fast on that. So basically, if a producer is paying for his emission at home, he has not to pay the amount of the emissions abroad or in Europe for the CBAM. Especially for emerging countries, and what I can say for the steel industry, there are some countries that are trying to set up an ETS system to make their industries pay for the emissions, and that's correct, in order to have them or still competitive on the European market, and finding some way to do not damage economically so much the companies and the industries that they have to pay for the compensation. I'll make it short. The quantity of money that you pay to compensate your emission are discounted by the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it's also very important to include this particular number in your calculations.
yeah,
Because
that's really important.
if 50% has already been paid abroad, you call it home,
Yeah.
I guess because you are abroad at the moment. If it's already been paid abroad, it's very important to include that in the calculation so that when you're forecasting the price or when you're buying the certificates,
yeah,
you don't buy too much. And perhaps, the certificates is also, there's a lot of still unknowns about that.
Yeah.
You have a few insights.
yeah. With the certificate is complicated. So let's sum up. The emission, the cost of the emission is given by the quantity of the emission that are exceeding the benchmark value time the price of the ETS time the allowance minus the amount already compensated home. To do not have CBAM as a tax, because it's not a tax, there is a different mechanism. And so the emissions are not compensated using money, but are compensated using certificates. And these certificates must be bought from the European, from the bank of the certificates. It's the same as the ETS certificates. And that amount, a certain amount of certificates is designed to cover a certain amount of emissions. The real problem and the real difference between ETS and CBAM, both of them are working on the certificates, is that the certificates of the CBAM are not tradable. It means that on top of that, they are expiring. It seems that there are precise rules on the number of certificates that can be bought compared to the emissions. So it seems that you have to buy every time you import or at every quarter at least 80% or 2/3 or different figures. But anyhow, the point is that you have to buy the certificates, you cannot trade them, and you cannot give them back at the same price.
And they expire.
So it means only one thing. Calculations must be as much precise as possible.
Yeah.
Because you have already in the calculation something that cannot be controlled. That is the price of the ETS emission.
Yeah.
If you, on top of that, you have imprecise calculation on the emission and imprecise calculation on the precursors or everything,
unrealistic benchmarks in comparison to the real emissions of the good that you're bringing into the country.
And here there are two things really important to minimize the errors between the calculated values and the real values. I mean, the forecasted values and the real values. A good platform that integrates all this data and a good consultant that it's always synchronized and updated about the news from the European Union. Because as we told, it's a baby, the CBAM is a baby, and there will be a lot of change, I'm pretty sure. On a weekly basis when the system will start touching money and not just numbers.
Luigi, if I may ask, so that actually also means that if you don't buy enough certificates, you are limited to the amount what you can produce?
This is how it works.
And by that we can set we kind of know what's going to be the maximum, because we know how much are being bought.
I want to be honest. It's too early to understand that now, because for the ETS it works like that. You can basically ETS is saying, okay, you can create maximum these emissions. After that, you have to stop. CBAM, it's so far it's not clear how it will be, because also this fact that the certificates are not tradable now, it's complicating a lot of things. It's done for good because they want to avoid speculation on that. If you start having certificates going here and there with someone speculating on them, it can move really far away from the initial scope of CBAM, that is to control the emission of the material imported into Europe and to avoid the export and the leakage of the emissions. But on the other hand, it's another limitation, it's another cap that is put to the possibility to use it in a real effective way.
Do you personally think that a secondary market would have a place for CBAM?
I'm pretty sure that some secondary market will be in place. I don't know if it will be secondary market of CBAM certificates, so something like futures or something like that, or if this rigid structure in Europe will bring abroad these markets and these kind of speculations. I don't know. I don't know that. But for sure, what I see now, it's something too rigid to be effective. And so something will change.
You speak about the importance of data quality, of getting the calculations right.
Yeah.
How can importers be sure that the data that they receive from their installations, from their suppliers, is correct?
Okay. Here, the regulation is pretty clear. It's possible, but not mandatory in the transitional period, to have third-party verification of the reports in the moment they are prepared. And of course, to have this third-party declaration, you need a company accredited to do that. That's quite easy. There are big names all around the world doing this thing for the emission, different protocols. So the real problem is that this company should go on the installation side and check correctness of the data, bills, invoices, consumptions. I see that really complicated. I see that complicated for several things. First, that it's maybe the first, but not the most important, that there is not a rule to control that. There are no rules. There are rumors that in September, they will have published.
It was August, wasn't it? Last time. Last time it was August. September now. Middle
September. It will be October. But honestly speaking, that's not a big deal, because to verify, we are not talking about how to calculate. We are talking about how to verify the correctness and the goodness of the data. And of course, to verify consumption of methane, you can use it for the GTG protocol, you can use it for a local protocol, you can use it for CBAM, but the consumption is the same and you have to check the same device and the same bills. So I don't see that really, really complicated. What I see is a German inspector going to a Chinese farm, checking all the things that he has to check, and the Chinese farm ready to open all the books about the purchase of the raw material with all the origins and everything. I don't see that really workable. I see that more the possibility to evaluate the data, but again, some support from the platform is needed, checking the deviation from the standard. That can be good. So in the moment, we will know that there are not so many default values, that the data are somehow calculated and everything. You can perform statistics. And checking the outliers, it can be easy.
You remove the zeros.
You remove the zeros, but it's something that even now that I'm just into steel, just looking at the final figures of the emission, knowing the product, I can understand if they did some error in the calculation or not. Because, we're not, different countries, different emission factors and everything. But what is 2 in China cannot be 7 in Taiwan and vice versa. For the importers, it can be complicated because normally they are not skilled and they don't know what they are importing, or they don't know the processes of everything. So again, a good platform collecting a lot of data and some consultant that can sum up this data and have this experience.
Any closing remarks as we're trying to wrap this up, Luigi?
Just one thing, that CBAM is complicated, CBAM, it's foggy now, but it's important to do not lose the focus on CBAM, because sooner or later it will become a reality, and it's better to be prepared for that.
Good. Luigi, thank you for joining this podcast. Amazing that you were here. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, and we would love to see you at the next podcast. Bye.
Welcome to the GTG Podcast, where we explore the ins and outs of CBAM. Join us as we dive into the latest strategies.